For a big chunk of my life, I tried to control absolutely everything. You see, I was a very, very sensitive soul. In fact, not just being sensitive, I was hypersensitive. I was sensitive to electrical equipment, to pollution, to chemicals, to people, to buildings, loads of food intolerances. Everything was troublesome. And the only way I could deal with it was to take control of my entire environment. But it wasn't just taking control of my environment, I also took control of the family environment because I had to. I felt I had to at that moment in time. But in retrospect, I was a fool because it locked me up and locked me up and locked me up, thinking that I was and behaving like God. I just wanted to protect myself. My symptoms were very severe. If I got exposed to things that weren't good for me, then I became very, very ill. I'm not the only one out there who's very hypersensitive, but I needed to try to find a way to just temporarily find relief. But it was only temporary. It never really dealt with the problem. You see, in life, the Lord, He gives us free will to control our lives. But actually, in retrospect, I realised that I was in the world of illusion, thinking I could control everything. It just knotted things up, and it made it very difficult for my family. I had a wife, I had 3 children, and it was just very tough for them, living with someone who was so sensitive, living with someone who needed things done this way and not that way. So I have to say thank you to all of you for your patience and your understanding, and I'm sorry for all the hardship that it caused in life. But that is what I felt I needed to do. But since coming to Krishna consciousness, I realised that life is very, very different. I did overcome a lot of my hypersensitivity before coming to Krishna consciousness by the Lord's arrangement in the background. But since coming to Krishna consciousness, I've realised so much about life. It's still so little in comparison to what I need to learn, but it feels a lot in other regards. But it is little. And what I mean by that is I've discovered that I'm not the controller. I did realise a while ago that in order to gain control you need to lose control, because then you realise you don't need it in the first place. But I didn't realise how it meant on a spiritual level, how it meant on actually trusting someone else to look after one's life. And I've realised as I've delved a little bit deeper into Krishna consciousness, and as I'm reminded in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, I'm reading the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam translated by Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya. I'm reading first canto, chapter 6, verse 7 today. And in this verse, Narada Muni is talking to Vasudeva about that he is reliant on his mother to look after him. But she can't do much. And she can't do much like he can't do much, because we're just like wooden puppets. We think we're the controller, we think we organise life, we think we make decisions. No, we don't make decisions. We're just the vocal cords to express certain things or to think in a certain way. But what we discover actually is there is nothing that's going on in this life, in this body, that is of my making. It's just me being a reactor to what the Lord is doing when he pulls the strings. But sometimes when he pulls the strings, we pull against him, because he does give us free will. He gives us free will to make certain decisions, which allows us to go off and wander off. And I did that for a big chunk of my life. I wandered off on my own. And where did I get? I got very, very, very lost. Completely lost. But why did I do it? Because actually the Lord enabled me to do it. And why? Because eventually he brought me back to Krishna consciousness, and when he brought me back to Krishna consciousness, I had a certain amount of life experience through living in the material world, outside of Krishna's consciousness, which then enabled me to enter into Krishna's consciousness as a Vanapasta monk with a very, very different viewpoint. Because of my life experiences, I was able to renounce and give up everything that I didn't need, and I didn't need much at all. And it's very, very, very beautiful. And I've realized I can't be God, I can't be the controller, I can't be the arranger. But what I can do is learn to listen and take guidance. And the lessons come via our Shiksha Gurus, spiritual masters, and the purer brahmacharis who have a lot more experience in Krishna consciousness that can help us to develop our own practice, our own devotional practice. And the more I've got into devotional service and realizing life is not about me, I, mine, and how I want it and how I don't want it, and how much I want this and how much I don't want that. Actually, do you know what? I feel relieved. I feel totally relieved not to be the controller anymore, because it's such a massive heartache. Try to control this, try to control that. It's challenging. It's so challenging. And now just to be surrendered to the Lord and just know that my purpose is to serve Him, it's beautiful. I spent so many years of my life serving myself and my family, of course, and my clients in the business, etc., and my friends who I cared for. But there was always an ulterior motive of looking after myself as well, as much as serving everyone else. But now there isn't that ulterior motive. My life is here to serve the Lord. And why? Why do I want to serve the Lord? Because do you know what? He's arranged so many things in this life that I wasn't even aware of, but in retrospect I look at and realise, wow, he knew exactly what's going on. I'll give you an example. In 2017, my second wife turned around to me and said, I want an independent life. I said, okay. I packed my rucksack and left home. I left my possessions, I left all my furniture, I left the car, I left the business, I left everything. And I went to a Spanish island. And on that Spanish island, I went and lived up in the hills in a forest, in an old shack-stroke cave. Now, in 2017, when my wife said she wanted an independent life, it was May, if I remember rightly. And then, in August, I turned 50. And 50 years old is significant in Krishna consciousness, although I didn't realise at the time, because at 50 years old, you leave family life. And where do you go as a Vanapasta ashram? Because after what you have is you have 4 ashrams. You have a brahmachari life, which is up to the age of 25, where you're a practicing student basically, and then from 25 to 50 you live in family life, and from 50 upwards you go into the forest, and then for some who are more purified, you become sannyasis. So I had left by the Lord's arrangement, through my wife's decision, to go at the age of 50 into the forest, into the Vanapasta ashram. And lo and behold, 2 months later, I found myself in India, and I had this tattoo put on me. Oops, hold on. It's all covered by this tattoo. I don't know if you can read Sanskrit. It's Sharanagati, surrender to the Lord. I had this tattoo put on me, and I still wasn't Krishna consciousness at that time. You see, the Lord was working in the background. He's the arranger of everything. So he was arranging all these things to change in this life for me to then make further decisions. Well, I still wasn't ready to come back to Krishna consciousness, so I went and got myself into another relationship with huge amounts of attachments. My fault. No one else's fault, just mine. But eventually, something happened, and again in the background, Lord Krishna just gave me some strength, and I ran away. I literally ran away. And when I ran away, I was living, where was I? I was living in Europe at the time. And I ran away, and I came back to the UK. And at that moment in time, I was studying Buddhism, self-study that was. And I knew that I actually said to my ex-girlfriend that if I ever leave you, I'm going to become a monk. Did I think that would ever happen? No. Anyway, I got to England, and I decided, okay, should I become a Buddhist monk or a Hare Krishna monk? I was really into my Buddhism. It felt really, really good. And then I had to make a decision to just go, because I realised my ex-girlfriend was about to follow me back to London, so I had to get away again. And my feet walked me to the Bhaktivedanta Manor in London, and the Hare Krishnas, by the Lord's arrangement, welcomed me in there. It wasn't so easy to fully integrate, because actually I was of older age, and they do tend to take the younger brahmacharis in. But eventually they realised that I was wanting to commit myself, and they allowed me in. And by the Lord's arrangement, he brought me back to Krishna consciousness. And it's beautiful. He arranged everything. And do you know what? Everything that I've experienced in my life, however much pain and suffering, anxiety or stress, I don't look back on it for any reason to think, do you know what? It was meant to be this way. It was part of life's experiences. Although I went off on my own tangent, the Lord let me do it because he realised I need certain experiences in life. And do you know what? The moment I decided to become a Vanapasta monk and actually commit myself to the ashram, and then I came out to India by instructions of my spiritual master, I realised that it was so easy for me to renounce. What I mean by that, and I don't want to sound cocky at all, but because I had certain life experiences, and I realised that having the home, having the car, having the bills, having all the responsibilities and management of life was stressful. But for the anxieties, every happiness that moment I had were just temporary, and all the stresses and anxieties were beyond acceptable levels at certain moments and times. And therefore, to give all these things up was the right thing I needed to do. My children were all grown up at the time, although I have to say one of my children felt that he was too young, although I felt he was right at the right age, but he felt otherwise. He struggled a bit with that. He struggled a lot, in fact. But by the Lord's arrangement, decisions were made, and I became a monk. And I realise now that even when by becoming a monk, I still wanted to just do certain things in my way. And it's only through going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And the Lord hasn't taught me through studying a syllabus that's written and I'm signed up for in a precise university or college type environment. Instead, he's sent me to what I call Lord Krishna's University of Life and Love, which is a syllabus that I don't know about, a syllabus that's tailored to me, that if I allow myself to go through every lesson the Lord wants to take me through, and try not to have to repeat too many, although I have had to, then I realise that I am just this puppet. The Lord's arranged absolutely everything in my past, and my past, and my past, my present, and He's also got my future lined up. And it's beautiful. It's so beautiful to know actually that I've got no other purpose in life on a day-to-day basis but to serve the Lord. And serving the Lord is the most beautiful thing. To wake up every day and just serve the Lord rather than serving me is divine. And so much so I have to be careful not to over-endeavour with my seva, because I do just want to serve the Lord and serve the Lord and serve the Lord. And to realise actually the more I serve, the deeper I go, the more I'm beginning to understand a little bit more about life. He gives me a little bit of intelligence. And the more I go a little bit deeper, a little bit more he reveals and reveals and reveals and decontaminates my very polluted and toxic mind and my body. I've got so much more to do. A lot of people think that if we go to Krishna consciousness and we commit our lives, make Lord Krishna the centre of our lives, then maybe at the end of this life we'll go back to Godhead. I can't picture me being ready to go back to Godhead. But do you know what? It's a journey that has its lessons, which means that it's not just hunky-dory. Some of the lessons we have to learn are demanding. But when you learn the lessons and you realise, do you know what, my character's changing, my personality, my ego is getting a little bit more, let me say, under control. The pride and the jealousy and the greed and the intolerance levels are going down and down and down. But what I realised, unlike studying at college or university in the material world, which is normally over a 2 or 3 or 5 year course, this course I'm on is a lifetime's worth of studying. And it's not just a lifetime, it's a lifetimes. Because every time in my past lives I've never studied hard enough. And that is why the Lord keeps us bringing us back into a new body to study that bit a bit deeper, to purify and cleanse ourselves that a little bit more and more and more. And even if you're not sure about God and believe in God, the one thing that Śrīmad Bhāgavatam said, when he was interviewed by a journalist, the journalist said to him, how do you know that you go back to Godhead? How do you know? And for a moment, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam waited before he responded. And he said, I can't tell you for 100% that you'll go back to Godhead. But one thing that I can say to you is, it's worth the life, because by becoming a better person, then maybe we feel that we can help society as a whole, because society as a whole is very, very harsh, it's very challenging. But now I feel that the Lord has given me an opportunity to go a little bit deeper, to understand my purpose in life and realise my purpose is to be the Lord's puppet, and therefore not to try to be the ranger, not to be the controller, and never to even desire or even think about becoming God. I ask you, have you realised for yourself already that there is more to life than me, I, mine? I urge you to give some further thought to consider actually maybe that there is a source to everything we have in our lives, and maybe we realise that, like me, we're just another one of the Lord's puppets who he just wants to look after and look after and look after. Hare Krishna.